Some bonds are so strong that not even death can break them. Love has a way of waiting, even when waiting seems impossible. Outside Mercy General Hospital, 8-year-old Emma saw a golden retriever lying by the doors, soaked from the rain, but refusing to leave. This was Rusty, and he had been waiting here every day for 3 weeks. His owner, Nurse Margaret, had been the heart of their small town before she passed away. Everyone tried to help Rusty find a new home, but he wouldn't go. He believed Margaret would walk through those doors again. Emma's grandmother explained how some dogs love so deeply they can't let go. As Emma sat with Rusty, she learned about loyalty that lasts forever. The whole town was moved by this dog's devotion. But what secret was Rusty keeping that would change everything Emma thought she knew about love? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma's grandmother, Dorothy, pulled her weathered Buick into the hospital parking lot, the windshield wipers fighting against the steady June rain. Through the passenger window, Emma could see the golden retriever still there, lying motionless beside the automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital. His coat, once surely lustrous and proud, now appeared matted and dulled by days of exposure to the elements. "Grandma Dorothy, he's still there," Emma whispered, pressing her small palm against the cool glass. At 8 years old, she possessed that particular kind of childhood wisdom that could cut straight to the heart of things adults preferred to complicate. Dorothy Henley turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment, her 72-year-old hands resting on the steering wheel. She had lived in Millbrook for over 5 decades, had watched this small Pennsylvania town grow from a farming community of 800 souls to a modest borough of 3,000. She knew every story, every family, every heartbreak that had ever walked through those hospital doors. "Yes, sweetheart, that's Rusty, and he's been waiting there for 3 weeks now." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt. Waiting for what? The question hung between them like morning mist. Dorothy had been dreading this conversation, knowing that Emma's summer visit would inevitably lead to difficult questions about loss, about love, about the things that make life both beautiful and heartbreaking. "He's waiting for someone who can't come back," Dorothy said gently. "Someone who meant the world to him." They sat together watching the dog, who seemed oblivious to the rain collecting in small puddles around his still form. Every few minutes, Rusty would lift his head toward the hospital entrance, alert and hopeful, then settle back into his patient vigil when no familiar figure emerged. Margaret Thompson had been more than Millbrook's head nurse for 35 years. She had been the town's unofficial guardian angel, the person you called when conventional medicine wasn't enough, when what a patient needed was someone who understood that healing involved more than just medical procedures. Margaret possessed that rare combination of professional competence and genuine warmth that made both doctors and patients trust her completely. Dorothy remembered the day Margaret had first brought Rusty to the hospital as a puppy. 7 years ago, the golden retriever had been abandoned at the county animal shelter, malnourished and skittish, with one ear slightly torn from some long-forgotten trauma. Margaret had seen him during one of her volunteer visits to the shelter and knew immediately that he was meant for something special. "This one has a healer's heart," Margaret had announced to Dr. Harrison, Mercy General's chief physician. "Look, at his eyes, he sees people's pain." Dr. Harrison had been skeptical at first. A therapy dog program was ambitious for a small rural hospital with limited resources. But Margaret had that way of making impossible things seem not only possible, but necessary. Within 6 months, Rusty had completed his certification training and become the hospital's first official therapy animal. The transformation had been remarkable. Rusty seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of human suffering. He knew which patients needed gentle comfort and which required playful distraction. He could sense when someone was afraid and would position himself so they could rest a hand on his warm, steady flank, Children going in for surgery would stop crying when Rusty appeared in the pre-op area. Elderly patients facing their final days would find peace in his calm, accepting presence. Margaret and Rusty became inseparable. Every morning at 6:30, Margaret would arrive at the hospital with Rusty trotting beside her, his therapy dog, vest neat and clean, his tail wagging with genuine enthusiasm for the day ahead. They would make rounds together, visiting patients who had specifically requested to see the healing dog, as many called him. Emma's parents, Sarah and Michael, worked demanding jobs in the city, her mother as an attorney, her father as a software engineer. The summer arrangement with Grandma Dorothy had become a cherished tradition, giving Emma the kind of unhurried childhood experiences that were becoming increasingly rare. Millbrook moved at a different pace than the suburbs where Emma lived. During the school year, here people knew each other's names, remembered birthdays, and gathered on front porches in the evening to share stories and cold lemonade. But this summer felt different. Even before Dorothy had explained about Margaret and Rusty, Emma had sensed a sadness in the town that hadn't been there during her previous visits. Conversation stopped when she entered rooms. Adults wore expressions of barely contained grief, as if they were all carrying the same heavy secret. "Tell me about Margaret," Emma said, as they sat in the car, both of them watching Rusty's lonely vigil. Dorothy's eyes softened. "Margaret was my dearest friend. We went to nursing school together. Back in 1965, can you believe that? She was always the brave one. The one who volunteered for the hardest cases, who stayed late to hold the hand of someone who was scared or in pain." She paused, remembering. Margaret never married, never had children of her own. She used to say that every patient was her family. Every child in the pediatric ward was like a grandchild to her. When she found Rusty, it was like watching a mother discover the child she'd been meant to raise all along. Through the rain-streaked windshield, they watched as a young nurse emerged from the hospital. She approached Rusty carefully, offering him a small dish of water and some food. The dog acknowledged her kindness with a gentle tail wag, but didn't move from his chosen spot. "That's Jennifer," Dorothy explained. "She worked closely with Margaret. In the cardiac unit, she's been trying to care for Rusty since," her voice caught slightly, "since Margaret passed." Emma studied the scene with the intense focus that children bring to moments they sense are important. "How did Margaret die?" Her heart gave out. It happened very suddenly, right there inside the hospital while she was checking on a patient. Dr. Harrison said she went peacefully, but Rusty was with her when it happened. He hasn't been the same since. The story of Margaret's final day had become part of Millbrook's collective memory. She had arrived at work that Tuesday morning, just as she had for thousands of mornings before, with Rusty at her side and a thermos of coffee in her hand. She had made her usual rounds, checking on post-surgical patients, comforting the families of those in critical care, and ensuring that everyone under her watch felt cared for and safe. Around 2 in the afternoon, while reviewing charts with Dr. Harrison, Margaret had suddenly pressed her hand to her chest. "Something's not right," she had said, her voice calm, even as her face went pale. Dr. Harrison had immediately called for assistance, but Margaret had collapsed before the crash team could arrive. Rusty had stayed beside her, whimpering softly, refusing to leave, even as the medical team worked frantically to revive her. Margaret Thompson was pronounced dead at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in May, surrounded by the colleagues who loved her and the dog who worshipped her. She was 67 years old and had devoted her entire adult life to caring for others. The funeral had been the largest in Millbrook's history. Patients traveled from neighboring counties to pay their respects. Families whose children Margaret had comforted during frightening medical procedures spoke tearfully about her impact on their lives. The hospital had closed for the afternoon so that all staff members could attend the service. But throughout the funeral, the reception, and the days that followed, Rusty had remained at the hospital entrance, as if he understood something the rest of them had missed, Various families had offered to take him home, to give him the love and care he needed during his grief. Animal control had been called twice by well-meaning citizens who worried about his welfare. The veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Chen, had examined him and pronounced him physically healthy but emotionally traumatized. Nothing and no one could convince Rusty to leave his post. "What will happen to him?" Emma asked, her voice small. Dorothy sighed. "I don't know, sweetheart. The hospital can't keep him there indefinitely. The town council is meeting about it next week. Some people think he should be placed in a home where he can heal and move forward. Others believe we should respect his choice to grieve in his own way." Emma absorbed this information with the seriousness of someone much older. "Can we visit him?" "Of course we can. In fact, I think Margaret would have wanted that very much." They left the car and walked through the rain toward the hospital entrance. Rusty lifted his head as they approached, his brown eyes taking in these new visitors with polite but distant interest. Emma knelt down beside him, not close enough to crowd him, but near enough that he could sense her gentle presence. "Hello, Rusty," she said softly. "I'm Emma, and this is my grandma Dorothy. We came to see you because we heard you're waiting for someone very special." The dog's ears perked slightly at the sound of her voice. Emma noticed that despite his bedraggled appearance, his eyes held intelligence and depth. This wasn't an abandoned stray. This was a beloved companion experiencing profound loss. "I know you miss Margaret," Emma continued. "Grandma Dorothy told me how much she loved you and how you helped sick people feel better. That must have made you both very happy." For the first time since they'd arrived, Rusty's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, but a small acknowledgement of connection. Dorothy watched her granddaughter's interaction with the grieving dog and felt something shift in her chest. Margaret had always believed that healing came through connection, through the simple act of one heart reaching out to another. Perhaps Emma, in her innocent directness, possessed the same gift that had made Margaret such an extraordinary nurse. As they prepared to leave, Emma turned back to Rusty one more time. "We'll come visit you again tomorrow, okay? Maybe we can sit together for a while?" Walking back to the car, Dorothy squeezed Emma's hand. "That was very kind of you, sweetheart." "He's not just sad," Emma observed. "He's waiting for something important, I can tell." Dorothy smiled despite her concerns. Her granddaughter possessed that rare combination of empathy and wisdom that suggested she might be exactly what both Rusty and their grieving community needed. That evening, as Emma helped prepare dinner in Dorothy's kitchen, she asked countless questions about Margaret, about Rusty, about the hospital, and the people who worked there. Dorothy found herself sharing memories she hadn't spoken aloud since the funeral. Stories about Margaret's legendary kindness, her terrible attempts at baking cookies for hospital fundraisers, her fierce protection of patients who had no other advocates. "She sounds like she was a very special person," Emma said as they sat down to eat. She was. Margaret believed that love is the most powerful medicine we have. She used to say that people don't just need their bodies healed, they need their hearts healed too. Emma nodded solemnly. "Like Rusty." "Yes," Dorothy agreed, "like Rusty." Outside, the rain continued to fall on the faithful dog who refused to abandon his vigil, waiting for a reunion that seemed impossible to everyone except him. But sometimes, Dorothy reflected as she watched her granddaughter's thoughtful expression, the impossible was simply something that required a different kind of understanding. The next morning would bring new questions, new attempts to solve the problem of Rusty's grief, and new discoveries about the depth of love that continues even after death. But for now, Emma was learning something profound about loyalty, loss, and the mysterious ways that broken hearts sometimes find exactly what they need. The morning sun had burned away the previous day's rain, leaving the hospital parking lot gleaming with fresh puddles that reflected the clear blue sky. Emma carried a small paper bag containing leftover chicken from dinner and a bottle of water she had carefully filled from Dorothy's kitchen tap. She walked with purpose toward the hospital entrance, where Rusty maintained his faithful vigil. "Good morning, Rusty," she said, settling cross-legged on the warm concrete beside him. "I brought you some breakfast," the golden retriever acknowledged. Her presence with a slight movement of his ears, but his gaze remained fixed on the hospital doors. Emma opened the bag and placed small pieces of chicken within his reach, then positioned the water dish nearby. She had learned yesterday that pushing too hard would cause him to withdraw, so she simply sat quietly, offering comfort through her presence rather than words. Dr. Harrison emerged from the hospital, his face showing the weariness that came from working too many consecutive shifts. He had been Margaret's closest colleague and friend, and her sudden death had left him struggling to fill the emotional void she had left behind. When he noticed Emma sitting with Rusty, he approached them with careful steps. "You must be Dorothy's granddaughter," he said gently. "I'm Dr. Harrison." "I'm Emma. I'm trying to keep Rusty company while he waits." Dr. Harrison knelt down beside them, his movements slow and deliberate. Rusty lifted his head slightly, recognizing the familiar scent and voice of someone who had been part of his daily routine for years. "Emma, I want to tell you about the day Margaret died, because I think Rusty would want you to understand why he can't leave this place." Emma nodded solemnly, sensing the importance of this moment. It was a Tuesday, just like any other day. Margaret arrived at 6:30 sharp with Rusty, and they began their rounds as usual. They visited Mrs. Patterson in room 204. She was recovering from gallbladder surgery and was frightened about going home alone. Margaret sat with her for 20 minutes, and Rusty rested his head on her bed so she could pet him while they talked. Dr. Harrison's voice grew softer as he continued. They checked on little Tommy Rodriguez in pediatrics. He had broken his leg in 3 places falling from a tree, and he was scared about the upcoming surgery. Margaret showed him pictures of other children who had healed completely from similar injuries, while Rusty performed his favorite trick, balancing a small treat on his nose until Tommy giggled. Emma watched Rusty carefully as Dr. Harrison spoke. The dog's ears were fully alert now, as if he recognized the stories and was remembering those final precious hours. Around noon, they visited the cardiac unit, where Mr. Chen was preparing for bypass surgery the next morning. Margaret explained the procedure in terms that made it sound routine rather than frightening, and Rusty seemed to sense the man's anxiety because he positioned himself so Mr. Chen could rest his hand on his back while they talked. Dr. Harrison paused, his own emotions making it difficult to continue. At 2 o'clock, Margaret was reviewing patient charts with me at the nurse's station. She had just finished updating Tommy Rodriguez's post-surgical care plan when she suddenly stopped writing and pressed her hand to her chest. She looked at me and said, "James, something's not right." Emma felt her heart racing as the story reached its climax. I immediately recognized the signs of a heart attack and called for the crash team. Margaret tried to stand but collapsed before they could reach us. Rusty was there instantly, positioning himself beside her, whimpering softly but refusing to move even as we worked to revive her. The doctor's voice broke slightly. "We did everything we could, Emma, but Margaret's heart had simply given all it had to give. She died surrounded by people who loved her, with Rusty holding vigil beside her until the very end." Emma wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Is that why he won't leave? Because she died here?" "I think it's more than that," Dr. Harrison replied thoughtfully. "Rusty was trained as a therapy dog, which means he learned to stay with people who needed comfort until help arrived or until they felt better. In his mind, Margaret needs him to stay, and his job isn't finished." As if responding to his name and the familiar voice discussing his purpose, Rusty moved closer to Dr. Harrison and rested his head against the doctor's knee. It was the first time in 3 weeks that he had initiated physical contact with another human being. "There's something else," Dr. Harrison said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "This was found in Margaret's locker after she died. It's addressed to whoever would be caring for Rusty." He handed Emma a small, sealed envelope, the handwriting on The outside was neat and precise. For Rusty's guardian, important instructions inside. Margaret wrote this, Emma asked. Yes, she dated it just 2 weeks before she died. I haven't opened it because I wasn't sure who Rusty's guardian would be, but I think he looked meaningfully at Emma. I think you might be exactly who Margaret had in mind. Emma turned the envelope over in her hands, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. Should I open it now? Why don't you take it home and share it with your grandmother first? This feels like a decision that shouldn't be made alone. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed something she had missed during her previous visits. Tucked beneath Rusty's body was a small, worn piece of fabric, a hospital ID badge on a faded blue lanyard. Margaret's photograph smiled up from the laminated card, and Rusty had been protecting it like a precious treasure. He's been keeping her badge safe, Emma whispered. Dr. Harrison nodded. He took it from her locker somehow. The housekeeping staff found him there the day after she died, lying on the floor beside her things. He must have known he needed something to remember her by. That afternoon, Emma sat at Dorothy's kitchen table while her grandmother read Margaret's letter aloud. The handwriting was shaky, as if Margaret had been struggling with pain while writing it. To whoever finds this letter, Dorothy began. If you are reading this, it means my heart has finally given out, and someone kind has taken responsibility for Rusty's care. Please know that he is not just grieving. He is trying to complete his final assignment. Emma leaned forward intently. 2 weeks ago, I received news that my heart condition had worsened beyond what surgery could repair. I have perhaps a month left, maybe less. I have not shared this information with my colleagues because I wanted to work until the end, bringing comfort to patients who need it, but I am deeply concerned about Rusty's future. Dorothy paused, her voice trembling slightly. He has been trained to stay with people until his job is finished. In his mind, his job was to help me help others, and my death does not signal the end of that mission. He will wait at the hospital because that is where our work together happened, and he believes I will return to continue it with him. Emma felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together. She knew she was going to die. It appears so, Dorothy replied, continuing to read. There is something hidden in my house that will explain Rusty's true purpose and his future. Look in the special place where we kept our most treasured memories, behind the photograph of the children's ward Christmas party. Rusty's real mission is just beginning, and he will need someone brave and loving to help him understand. The letter concluded with a simple line: trust in love's ability to find a way. Margaret. Emma and Dorothy sat in silence for several minutes, processing the implications of Margaret's final message. The woman had known she was dying, but had continued working, continued caring for others, while secretly preparing for Rusty's future. We have to go to her house, Emma said finally. We have to find what she left for us. Dorothy nodded slowly. Yes, I believe we do. Margaret was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else when it came to caring for those she loved. If she left instructions for Rusty, then following them is the right thing to do. As evening approached, Emma returned to the hospital to sit with Rusty one more time. She told him about the letter, about Margaret's final words, about the mystery, waiting to be solved in the house where they had shared 7 years of love and companionship. I don't know what Margaret wanted us to find, Emma said softly, but I promise we're going to help you finish whatever job she gave you. She loved you too much to leave you without a purpose. For the first time since his vigil began, Rusty looked directly into Emma's eyes and held her gaze. In that moment she understood that their journey together was just beginning, and that Margaret's death had not been an ending, but a transformation, the start of something neither she nor Rusty could yet imagine. The next morning brought with it the kind of gentle warmth that makes summer days feel full of possibility. Emma had awakened before dawn, her mind already focused on the mystery waiting to be solved at Margaret's house. But first, she wanted to establish a routine with Rusty, something that would let him know she was committed to being part of his life, whatever that might mean. She prepared a more substantial breakfast this time. Scrambled eggs, small pieces of toast, and fresh water in a proper bowl she had convinced Dorothy to let her borrow. When she arrived at the hospital, Rusty was awake and alert, as if he had been expecting her. "Good morning, friend," Emma said, settling into what was becoming their usual spot on the concrete beside the entrance doors. "I brought real breakfast today, and I have some news about Margaret's letter." As Rusty cautiously approached the food she had brought, Emma noticed something different about his demeanor. He was still clearly grieving, still maintaining his vigilant watch of the hospital. Indoors, but there was a subtle shift in the way he carried himself, less desperate, more purposeful. "The letter says you have a job to finish," Emma continued conversationally. "Margaret knew you would wait here because you're such a good, loyal dog. But she also left us clues about what comes next." Dr. Harrison appeared in the hospital entrance, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the kind of tired expression that suggested he had been working through the night. When he saw Emma and Rusty sharing their breakfast, his face softened into something approaching a smile. "You're becoming quite the regular visitor," he observed, joining them in the morning sunshine. "Rusty needs consistency," Emma replied with 8-year-old certainty. "My mom says that when someone is sad, the most important thing is showing up every day so they know they're not alone." Dr. Harrison was struck by the wisdom contained in such a simple observation. "Your mother is a smart woman. Margaret always said the same thing about healing, that presence is often more powerful than medicine." He sat down beside them, his coffee cup warming his hands despite the growing heat of the summer morning. "I've been thinking about that letter, Emma, about what Margaret might have hidden in her house, and why she was so specific about where to look." "Behind the photograph of the children's ward Christmas party," Emma recited from memory. "I remember that party," Dr. Harrison said thoughtfully. "It was 2 years ago, right before Christmas. Margaret had organized it as a way to bring some joy to the children who had to spend the holidays in the hospital. She invited therapy dogs from 3 counties, arranged for Santa to visit, and somehow convinced the hospital kitchen to make homemade cookies." Emma listened intently while continuing to offer Rusty small pieces of egg from her palm. "Rusty was the star of that party," Dr. Harrison continued. "There was one little girl, she couldn't have been more than 6 years old, who had been in the pediatric ward for weeks with a serious blood disorder. She hadn't spoken to anyone since she'd arrived, not to her parents, not to the nurses, not even to me." He paused, remembering. But when Rusty approached her wheelchair, she reached out and touched his head and whispered something in his ear. Within an hour, she was laughing and talking to everyone. Margaret took a photograph of that moment, the little girl whispering to Rusty while he listened with complete attention. Emma felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "Do you think that's the photograph Margaret mentioned in her letter?" "I think it's very likely. That picture meant everything to Margaret. She kept it on her desk at work and had a copy at home. She used to say it proved that healing comes in many forms, and sometimes the medicine people need most isn't found in bottles or pills." Just then, a young woman in scrubs emerged from the hospital, her face lighting up when she saw the small group gathered around Rusty. Emma recognized her as the nurse who had been trying to care for Rusty during his vigil. "This must be Emma," the nurse said warmly. "I'm Jennifer Collins. I worked with Margaret in the cardiac unit." Emma stood politely and shook Jennifer's outstretched hand. "Nice to meet you. Dr. Harrison was just telling me about the Christmas party and the little girl who whispered to Rusty." Jennifer's expression grew tender with memory. "Angela Martinez. That was her name. Margaret never forgot a patient's name, even years later. Angela had been so frightened and withdrawn, but something about Rusty helped her find her voice again. She knelt down beside Rusty, who accepted her gentle attention with quiet dignity. "I've been so worried about him. He's eating the food we leave, and he drinks water. But he won't let anyone get too close, except with you, Emma. He seems different when you're here." I think he knows I want to help him finish whatever Margaret asked him to do, Emma replied. We just have to figure out what that is. Jennifer reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, colourful object. I brought this from the pediatric ward. It's one of Rusty's toys, a knitted mouse that Margaret made for him. The children always loved playing with it when Rusty visited their rooms. She placed the hand-knitted toy near Rusty, who immediately perked up with interest. The toy was clearly well-loved, with slightly faded colours and soft edges that spoke of countless gentle games with sick children who needed distraction from their pain and fear. Margaret knitted this herself? Emma asked, examining the careful stitches and cheerful design. She made toys for all the therapy animals, Jennifer explained. But this mouse was special because it was Rusty's first. She gave it to him during his training, and he learned to use it to engage with patients who were too shy or scared to interact directly with him. Rusty gently took the toy in his mouth, not to play with it, but to hold it close. Emma watched as his entire body seemed to relax slightly, as if the familiar object had reconnected him to happier memories of his work with Margaret. He remembers, Emma whispered. He remembers helping the children. Dr. Harrison stood up, brushing dust from his pants. I think it's time we paid a visit to Margaret's house. If there are answers waiting to be found, we shouldn't keep them, or Rusty, waiting any longer. Emma looked down at Rusty, who was still holding his knitted mouse with gentle care. Would you like to come with us? To Margaret's house? For the first time since his vigil began, Rusty stood up. He looked toward the hospital doors one more time, as if checking to make sure Margaret wasn't about to emerge, then turned his attention back to Emma. The message was clear. He was ready to trust her guidance, at least for now. I'll drive, Jennifer offered. I have Margaret's house key. She gave it to me months ago in case of emergencies. I never imagined I'd need to use it for something like this. As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed that Rusty had carefully placed Margaret's ID badge in a safe spot beside the hospital entrance, as if marking his territory for return. He was willing to leave temporarily, but his commitment to the vigil remained unshaken. The short drive to Margaret's house was filled with anticipation and gentle conversation about the woman who had touched so many lives. Emma sat in the back seat with Rusty, who seemed both nervous and hopeful about returning to the place where he had been truly happy. Margaret's house was a modest, well-maintained cottage surrounded by flower gardens that showed her nurturing touch. Even in her absence, roses bloomed along the front fence, and herbs grew in neat rows beside the kitchen window. She always said a healer's home should be a place of peace, Jennifer murmured as they approached the front door. Emma held Rusty's leash gently, feeling the weight of responsibility for whatever they were about to discover. Margaret's final message had promised answers, but Emma sensed they were about to learn something that would change not just Rusty's future, but her own understanding of love, loss, and the mysterious ways that purpose can transcend even death. Margaret's house welcomed them with the kind of silence that speaks of love temporarily absent rather than love that had ended. The rooms still held her presence, fresh flowers in mason jars, books marked with careful bookmarks, and the lingering scent of lavender sachets tucked into linen closets. Rusty moved through the familiar spaces with a mixture of comfort and confusion, his tail wagging tentatively as he rediscovered the home he had shared with Margaret for 7 precious years. Emma followed behind him, taking in the details that revealed so much about the woman who had inspired such devotion. Every surface held evidence of Margaret's caring nature. Thank you cards from patients covering the refrigerator, photographs of hospital staff celebrations arranged on the mantelpiece, and a kitchen counter lined with recipe boxes that suggested a woman who believed food was another form of medicine. "Look at this," Jennifer called from the living room, where she had discovered a bookshelf dedicated entirely to veterinary care and animal therapy training manuals. Margaret never stopped learning about how to help Rusty be the best therapy. Dog, possible. Dr. Harrison examined the collection with professional interest. Here's the certification manual for the program, where Rusty received his training. And this one, Advanced Techniques in Animal-Assisted Therapy, was published just last year. Emma was drawn to a corner of the room where Margaret had created what could only be described as a shrine to her work with Rusty. A small desk held carefully organized photo albums, each one labeled with dates and locations. Rusty's first year, pediatric ward visits 2019-2021, cardiac recovery patients, and holiday celebrations. She documented everything, Emma marveled, opening the album labeled Special Moments. Page after page revealed the impact of Rusty's work. Photographs of children smiling for the first time since arriving at the hospital, elderly patients finding comfort in his gentle presence, and families discovering hope during their darkest hours. One photograph in particular caught Emma's attention. A young boy, probably her own age, sitting in a wheelchair with Rusty's head resting in his lap. The child's expression showed pure joy, and someone had written in careful handwriting beneath the picture, "Tommy, first smile after leg surgery. Rusty knew exactly what he needed." "That's the boy Dr. Harrison told us about yesterday," Emma realized. "The one who broke his leg falling from a tree." Jennifer leaned over to look. Margaret always said that Rusty could see into people's hearts. He knew when someone needed playfulness and when they needed quiet comfort. She never had to tell him what to do, he just knew. Rusty had settled himself on the living room carpet, in a spot where he could watch all of them while remaining close to what had clearly been his favorite resting place when Margaret was alive. His eyes followed their movements, alert but patient, as if he understood they were searching for something important. The letter mentioned looking behind the photograph. "Of the children's ward Christmas party," Emma reminded them. "We need to find that picture." They began searching systematically, checking the walls of each room for the specific photograph Margaret had referenced. The house was filled with pictures, decades worth of memories from Margaret's nursing career, personal moments with friends and colleagues, and countless images of Rusty in various stages of his training and work. Dr. Harrison found it in Margaret's bedroom, hanging on the wall opposite her bed, where she would have seen it first thing every morning and last thing every night. The photograph was larger than the others, professionally framed, and showed a scene of pure magic. The pediatric ward transformed into a winter wonderland, with therapy dogs scattered throughout the room, bringing joy to children who had been spending the holidays away from home. At the center of the image, exactly as Dr. Harrison had described, was a small girl in a wheelchair, leaning close to whisper something in Rusty's attentive ear. The dog's expression showed complete focus, as if the child's words were the most important thing in the world. "This is it," Emma said softly, her voice filled with reverence for the moment captured forever in the photograph. Jennifer carefully lifted the frame from the wall, and immediately they could see that something had been taped to the back. A manila envelope, sealed and labeled in Margaret's distinctive handwriting, Rusty's next chapter, for the person who loves him enough to help. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside were several documents, official letterhead from Children's Memorial Hospital in Philadelphia, training certificates, and a handwritten letter that was longer and more detailed than the first one they had found. "Should I read it out loud?" Emma asked, looking around at the small group that had gathered in Margaret's bedroom. Dr. Harrison nodded. "I think Margaret would want all of us to hear this together." Emma cleared her throat and began to read. "My dear friends, if you have found this letter, it means Rusty has found someone who cares enough to help him discover his true calling. What I am about to tell you may come as a surprise, but I have been preparing for this moment for over a year." She paused, gathering her courage. 18 months ago, I was contacted by Dr. Linda Rodriguez at Children's Memorial Hospital in Philadelphia. Her daughter, Angela, the little girl in this photograph, had been asking about the golden dog who helped her feel brave during her cancer treatment. Angela is now in remission and doing wonderfully, but she specifically requested that her mother find a way to bring therapy dogs to other children who were as scared and lonely as she had been. Emma looked up at her listeners, seeing the same amazement in their faces that she felt. Margaret knew about this a year and a half ago. Jennifer wiped away tears that had begun to fall. She never said a word to any of us. Emma continued reading. Dr. Rodriguez and I began corresponding about the possibility of Rusty transitioning to work, specifically with terminally ill children and their families. The program at Children's Memorial is unlike anything we have here in Millbrook. It focuses on helping children who may not recover find peace and comfort in their final days and supporting their families through the most difficult journey any parent can face. The weight of Margaret's plan was beginning to become clear. Emma's voice grew stronger as she read on. I knew that my heart condition was worsening, and I wanted to ensure that Rusty's gift for healing would continue even after I was gone. The training for this specialized work is intensive and requires a handler who can commit to living near the hospital for at least 2 years. I have been accepted as a volunteer trainer for the program, and Rusty has been pre-approved based on his work here. Dr. Harrison sat down heavily in Margaret's reading chair. She was planning to move to Philadelphia. The transition was scheduled to begin next month, Emma read. I had not yet told my colleagues because I wanted to finish training my replacement first, but I realize now that my heart had other plans. Rusty's future is now in the hands of whoever has shown him enough love to seek out this message. The final paragraph of the letter contained practical information. Contact details for Dr. Rodriguez, a scheduled interview date that had already passed, and detailed instructions for Rusty's specialized training requirements. Rusty has been preparing for this work without knowing it, Margaret had written. Every child he has comforted, every family he has helped heal, has been training for the most important job of his life. He is ready to help other children find peace, just as he helped Angela find her voice. Emma finished reading and looked around the room at 3 adults who were struggling to process the magnitude of Margaret's secret plan. In the corner, Rusty had been watching them intently, and Emma could swear he had understood every word. She was going to give up everything, Jennifer whispered. Her home, her friends, her life here in Millbrook. All so Rusty could help children who were dying. That's who Margaret was, Dr. Harrison said quietly. She never did anything halfway, especially when it came to caring for others. Emma knelt down beside Rusty and took his face gently in her hands. Is this what you've been waiting for? Did you know about Philadelphia? Rusty's response was immediate and unmistakable. His tail began to wag with the first genuine enthusiasm he had shown since Margaret's death. He stood up, walked to Emma's backpack and carefully retrieved something from the side pocket, Margaret's hospital ID badge, which he had been carrying with him since they left the hospital. He brought the badge to Emma and dropped it at her feet, then sat down and looked directly into her eyes. The message was clear. He was ready to trust her with Margaret's dream. The interview date has passed, Dr. Harrison observed, reviewing the documents. Dr. Rodriguez probably thinks Margaret changed her mind. Then we need to call her, Emma said with 8-year-old certainty. We need to tell her about Margaret and about Rusty, and about how he's been waiting to finish his job. Jennifer checked her watch. It's still early enough to call today. Emma, are you sure you understand what this would mean? If Rusty goes to Philadelphia for this training, he might not come back to Millbrook for a very long time. Emma looked around Margaret's bedroom, taking in the evidence of a life devoted to healing others, then back at Rusty, who was watching her with complete trust and growing hope. I think Margaret knew that some kinds of love are bigger than staying in one place, Emma said thoughtfully. And I think Rusty has been waiting not just for Margaret to come back, but for someone to help him continue the work they started together. As they prepared to leave Margaret's house, Emma carefully tucked the recipe box under her arm, the artifact that had revealed so much about Margaret's nurturing spirit and her belief that healing came in many forms. The box contained not just instructions for cookies and comfort food, but Margaret's handwritten notes about which recipes worked best for families dealing with medical crises, which ingredients could be easily digested by patients with sensitive stomachs, and how food could be used as a bridge to difficult conversations about hope and loss. The drive back to Dorothy's house was filled with plans and possibilities. Emma had found her purpose for the summer, and perhaps for much longer than that. Rusty had discovered that his vigil was not about waiting for the past to return, but about preparing for a future that would honor everything Margaret had taught him about love, service, and the healing power of a faithful heart. That evening, Dorothy's kitchen became the unofficial headquarters for what Emma had begun calling Operation Rusty's Mission. The small round table was covered with documents from Margaret's house, the correspondence with Dr. Rodriguez, Rusty's training certificates, medical records, and the photograph albums that told the story of 7 years of healing work. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor beside Rusty, who had positioned himself where he could watch both the door and the adults, who were planning his future. The transition from Margaret's house back to Dorothy's had been easier than anyone expected, as if Rusty understood that forward movement was finally possible. Dr. Rodriguez sounded relieved when I called, Dorothy reported, hanging up the phone, after a lengthy conversation with the Philadelphia hospital. She had been wondering what happened when Margaret missed the scheduled interview. She's willing to meet with us tomorrow if we can make the drive to the city. Dr. Harrison spread Margaret's training documentation across the table. These records are remarkable. Margaret documented every aspect of Rusty's development as a therapy dog, his responses to different types of patients, his ability to sense emotional needs, even his behavior patterns when working with families experiencing grief. Jennifer picked up one of the photo albums, studying the careful notations Margaret had made beneath each picture. Look at this attention to detail. She wrote notes about every single interaction. Patient responded well to Rusty's calm presence. During chemotherapy, child's anxiety decreased significantly when Rusty remained in room during procedure. Thus, family found comfort in Rusty's steady presence during difficult news. Emma leaned against Rusty's warm flank, feeling his breathing slow and deepen as the adults discussed his future. It's like she was writing a report card for him, proving he was ready for something bigger. That's exactly what she was doing, Dr. Harrison realized. Margaret was building a case for why Rusty would be perfect for the specialized program at Children's Memorial. She knew that working with terminally ill children requires a different kind of training and temperament than general hospital therapy. Work. Dorothy returned to the table with a pot of tea and a plate of cookies that reminded Emma of the treats Margaret used to bake for hospital fundraisers. Dr. Rodriguez explained the program to me. It's called Comfort Companions, and it's specifically designed for children who are in hospice care or facing end-of-life situations. The weight of those words settled over the room like a gentle blanket. Emma found herself thinking about Angela Martinez, the little girl in the Christmas photograph who had whispered secrets to Rusty during her cancer treatment. Angela had recovered. But how many other children weren't as fortunate? What would Rusty have to do? Emma asked quietly. Jennifer consulted the documents Dr. Rodriguez had mailed to Margaret months earlier. The companion dogs live at the hospital and work with a team of specialists: doctors, social workers, chaplains, and family counselors. Their job is to provide comfort during medical procedures, help children process their fears about dying, and support families who are saying goodbye. Emma felt tears building in her eyes, not from sadness, but from a deep understanding of how important this work would be. Rusty would help children who are scared about dying feel less alone. Yes, Dr. Harrison said gently, and based on everything I've seen him do here in Millbrook, he has a natural gift for that kind of work. Some therapy dogs are good at encouraging play and activity. Others, like Rusty, seem to understand when what someone needs most is peaceful acceptance and companionship. Rusty lifted his head and looked directly at Emma, as if he had been following the conversation and wanted to contribute his own perspective. She scratched behind his ears, marveling at how such a gentle creature could carry such profound responsibility. "There's something else," Dorothy said, her voice careful and measured. "Dr. Rodriguez asked about who would serve as Rusty's handler during the training period. The program requires a human companion who can live at the hospital for at least 6 months, while the dog learns the specialized protocols." The room fell silent as the practical implications of Margaret's plan became clear. She had intended to make this transition herself, leaving behind everything familiar to ensure Rusty could fulfill his calling. Now that responsibility would fall to whoever stepped forward to continue her work. "I could take a sabbatical," Dr. Harrison offered thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about expanding my own knowledge of pediatric palliative care. The training stipend would cover living expenses," Jennifer added, reading from the program materials. And Margaret had already arranged for temporary housing near the hospital. Emma listened to the adults discussing logistics and felt a growing certainty in her chest. This conversation was missing the most important element, understanding what Rusty himself wanted and needed. "Can I see Margaret's photo albums again?" she asked. Dorothy handed her the album labeled Special Moments, and Emma began turning pages slowly, studying each photograph with new eyes. Here was Rusty comforting an elderly man during his final days. There he was helping a young mother cope with her child's serious diagnosis. Page after page showed the same pattern. Rusty somehow knowing exactly what each person needed and providing it without being asked. In one particularly moving photograph, Rusty was lying beside a hospital bed where a very young child, probably no more than 4 years old, was sleeping peacefully with one small hand resting on the dog's head. Margaret had written beneath it, "Sarah's last good day." Rusty stayed with her for 6 hours, never moving except to adjust his position when she needed to turn. Her parents said later that his presence helped them believe she was safe and loved. Emma closed the album and looked around the table at 3 adults who had devoted their careers to healing others. "I want to go with him," the words came out. Before she had fully thought them through, but once spoken, they felt absolutely right. "Emma, sweetheart," Dorothy began gently, "you're 8 years old. This is a very adult responsibility." "I know I'm 8, Emma interrupted, her voice steady. "And sure, but Rusty trusts me. And I understand what Margaret was trying to do because I felt it too. When I sit with Rusty, when I see how he looks at people who are sad or scared, I know he's meant for something special." Dr. Harrison studied Emma's earnest face. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to spend the rest of my summer helping Rusty get ready. I want to learn about the program, and about how to help children who are sick, and about what Margaret knew that made her so good at this work." Emma's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "And if there's a way for me to be part of his training, even just for a little while, I want to do that too." Jennifer exchanged a meaningful look with Dorothy. "Your parents would have to agree to something like that." "Then we'll ask them," Emma said simply. Emma said, "We'll show them Margaret's letters and tell them about Rusty's mission and explain how important this is. My mom always says that when something is really important, you find a way to make it work." Rusty stood up and walked to Emma, placing his head in her lap with a gesture that seemed to encompass both gratitude and agreement. In that moment, everyone in the room understood that Margaret's plan had been even more far-reaching than they had imagined. She had not just prepared Rusty for his next chapter, she had somehow arranged for him to find exactly the right person to help him through the transition. As the evening wound down and plans began to take shape for the next day's trip to Philadelphia, Emma remained on the floor with Rusty, both of them contemplating a future that would honor the past while reaching towards something entirely new. The photo album beside them told the story of one kind of healing, but Emma sensed they were about to begin writing the first chapter of another. The drive to Philadelphia took them through rolling Pennsylvania countryside that gradually gave way to urban landscapes as they approached the city. Emma sat in the back seat of Dorothy's car with Rusty beside her, both of them watching the world change outside the windows. Dr. Harrison had arranged to meet them at Children's Memorial Hospital, where Dr. Rodriguez would evaluate Rusty's suitability for the Comfort Companions program. Emma had spent the morning preparing for this meeting with the seriousness of someone much older. She had read through Margaret's correspondence twice, studied the program requirements, and even practiced questions she wanted to ask about what Rusty's new life might look like. In her backpack, she carried the most precious artifact from Margaret's house, a worn, leather-bound journal filled with Margaret's personal reflections on her work with therapy animals. "Are you nervous?" Dorothy asked, glancing at Emma in the rearview mirror. "A little," Emma admitted. "But I think Rusty is ready. And I think Margaret would be proud that we're doing this." Rusty seemed to sense the importance of the day. He sat quietly beside Emma, alert and calm, wearing the therapy dog vest that Jennifer had retrieved from his locker at Mercy General. The vest transformed him from a grieving pet into a professional companion animal, and Emma could see the confidence it gave him. Children's Memorial Hospital was unlike anything Emma had ever seen. The building was designed with healing in mind. Large windows filled the spaces with natural light. Gardens were visible from every corridor, and the walls were covered with cheerful artwork created by young patients. Even the waiting areas felt more like comfortable living rooms than sterile medical spaces. Dr. Linda Rodriguez met them in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the sort of calm presence that suggested years of experience helping families through difficult times. She knelt down to greet Rusty first, allowing him to approach her at his own pace and assess her intentions. "You must be Rusty," she said softly, holding out her hand for him to sniff. "I've heard so much about you from Margaret. She believed you were ready for very special work." Rusty's response was immediate and positive. His tail wagged gently, and he stepped closer to Dr. Rodriguez, allowing her to examine his vest and credentials. Emma watched this interaction with fascination, recognizing the same careful evaluation process that Rusty used when meeting new patients. "And you must be Emma," Dr. Rodriguez continued, standing to shake Emma's hand. "Margaret mentioned you specifically in her last letter. She said you had the kind of heart that understands healing." Emma felt a flutter of surprise. "Margaret wrote about me?" Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "She said that during her final weeks she had been observing how children and animals connected at the hospital, and that she had met a young girl who seemed to have an intuitive understanding of what suffering people needed. She thought you might be interested in learning about therapy work yourself someday." Dorothy exchanged a meaningful look with Emma. Even in her final days, Margaret had been thinking ahead, planning not just for Rusty's future, but for the continuation of her work through the next generation. Dr. Rodriguez led them through the hospital, explaining the Comfort Companions program as they walked. "We currently have 3 therapy dogs working with different units: pediatric oncology, cardiac care, and our hospice wing. Each dog has specialized training based on the specific needs of their assigned area." They paused outside a large, sunny room where Emma could see children of various ages engaged in activities with adult supervisors. Some were in wheelchairs, others moved slowly with the aid of walkers or IV poles, but all of them seemed engaged and as happy as their circumstances. Aloud, "This is our activity center," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "Children come here for art therapy, music sessions, and visits with our comfort animals. The goal is to provide normalcy and joy even when medical treatment is the primary focus of their days." Emma noticed a young girl, probably about her own age, sitting alone in a corner chair with a book open in her lap, but her attention focused on the window rather than the pages. The child's bald head and the medical port visible beneath her sweater told Emma everything she needed to know about why she was here. "That's Maria," Dr. Rodriguez said quietly, following Emma's gaze. "She arrived last week, and she's been having trouble adjusting to the hospital environment. She misses her dog at home very much." Without conscious thought, Emma found herself walking toward Maria's chair. Rusty followed beside her, seeming to understand that this moment was important. When they reached the girl, Emma sat down in the adjacent chair and spoke softly. "Hi, I'm Emma. This is Rusty. We're visiting the hospital today to learn about the therapy dog program." Maria looked up from her book, her eyes immediately focusing on Rusty with the kind of longing that spoke of deep animal love. "He's beautiful. Does he live here?" "Not yet," Emma replied, "but he might soon. He used to work at a hospital in our town, helping people who were scared or sad feel better. The person who trained him passed away recently, and now we're trying to help him find a new place where he can continue that work." Maria closed her book and leaned forward slightly. What kind of helping did he do? Emma thought of all the stories she had heard about Rusty's work with Margaret. He would sit with people during medical treatments so they wouldn't feel alone. He would let children pet him when they needed comfort. And sometimes he would just be present with people who were facing really hard things, so they would know someone cared about them. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I really miss my dog. Her name is Luna, and she always knew when I was scared about coming here for treatments. She would sleep in my bed the night before chemo and somehow make everything feel less terrible." Emma felt her heart breaking for this brave girl who was facing something no child should have to endure. "Would you like to meet Rusty? He's very gentle, and I think he would like to meet you too." Dr. Rodriguez had been watching this interaction with professional interest. She approached the small group and knelt down beside Maria's chair. "Would it be okay if Rusty visited with you for a few minutes? We're evaluating him as a potential addition to our therapy team." Maria nodded eagerly, and Emma carefully guided Rusty to a position where the girl could reach him comfortably. The dog seemed to instinctively understand the situation. He settled himself beside Maria's chair and rested his head near her lap, close enough for contact but not demanding attention. The transformation was immediate. Maria's entire posture relaxed as she began to gently stroke Rusty's head, and for the first time since they had arrived, Emma saw her smile. "He feels like Luna," Maria whispered, "warm and safe and like he understands." Emma opened Margaret's journal and showed Maria some of the photographs inside. "This was taken at Christmas time in our hospital. Rusty is visiting with children who had to spend the holidays getting medical treatment, just like you." Maria studied the photographs with intense interest. "The children look happy." "They do," Emma agreed. "I think that's Rusty's special gift, helping. People remember that even when things are really hard, there can still be moments of happiness and peace." Dr. Rodriguez made notes on her clipboard as she observed Rusty's interaction with Maria. The dog remained perfectly calm and responsive, allowing the girl to pet him while maintaining awareness of her medical equipment and physical limitations. "Rusty," Dr. Rodriguez said softly, "would you like to meet some of our other children?" For the next hour, they moved through different areas of the hospital, watching Rusty interact with young patients in various stages of treatment and recovery. In each situation, he seemed to adjust his approach based on what the individual child needed: playful energy for those who craved distraction, gentle stillness for those who were too tired for activity, and patient presence for those who simply needed to feel less alone. Emma found herself taking notes in Margaret's journal, documenting Rusty's responses and the children's reactions. She was beginning to understand that this work required not just a loving animal, but careful observation and adaptation to each unique situation. By the end of the evaluation, Dr. Rodriguez's smile told them everything they needed to know before. She spoke the official words. "Rusty is exactly what Margaret believed him to be, a natural healer with the temperament and training necessary for our most challenging work. If you're ready to begin the transition process, we would be honored to welcome him to our team." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Emma looked back through the windows at Maria, who was now reading her book with a small smile on her face. The brief interaction with Rusty had given her something precious, a moment of normalcy and comfort in the midst of an overwhelmingly difficult experience. "I think I understand now what Margaret meant about healing," Emma told Dorothy as they walked to the car. "It's not about making the hard things go away. It's about helping people find strength and peace, even when the hard things are still there." The drive home was filled with plans and possibilities, but also with the growing realization that saying goodbye to Rusty would be one of the most difficult things Emma had ever done. The journal in her lap contained Margaret's wisdom about love and loss, and Emma was beginning to understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is helping someone you care about fulfill their highest purpose, even when it means letting them go. 3 days after their visit to Children's Memorial, Emma was sitting in Dorothy's garden with Rusty when Jennifer arrived with an expression that immediately signaled important news. She carried a manila envelope and moved with the kind of careful urgency that suggested she had discovered something significant. "Emma, Dorothy," Jennifer called as she approached, "I found something at the hospital that changes everything we thought we knew about Margaret's plan." Dorothy emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "What kind of something?" Jennifer sat down on the garden bench and opened the envelope carefully. "Yesterday, while I was cleaning out Margaret's desk drawers, the ones we hadn't untouched because they were locked, I found this hidden in the back of the bottom drawer." She pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Comfort Phase 2 in Margaret's distinctive handwriting. Inside were medical documents, correspondence with doctors Emma had never heard of, and what appeared to be a detailed timeline spanning several months. "I don't understand," Emma said, leaning closer to examine the papers. "What's Project Comfort?" Jennifer's voice was quiet but steady. "Margaret wasn't just planning to move to Philadelphia with Rusty. She was dying, Emma. These are her medical records from the past year, and they show that she had been diagnosed with advanced heart disease 18 months ago." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. She had known that Margaret's death was sudden, but the idea that Margaret had been living with the knowledge of her own mortality while planning for Rusty's future was overwhelming. "She knew she was going to die?" Emma whispered. "Not just knew," Jennifer continued, "but planned for it. Look at this timeline." She spread out a handwritten chart that showed dates, medical appointments, and carefully noted milestones. Margaret scheduled her retirement from Mercy General to coincide with the progression of her disease. She arranged for Rusty's transfer to Philadelphia to happen during what she calculated would be her final weeks. Dorothy sat down heavily, her face pale with shock. She was going to work until she died? "That was always Margaret's way," Jennifer said gently. "But there's more. This folder contains correspondence with 3 other hospitals, not just Children's Memorial. Margaret was setting up a network of therapy dog programs, all designed to continue and expand after her death." Emma felt the world shifting around her as the true scope of Margaret's planning became clear. She wasn't just thinking about Rusty. She was thinking about all the therapy dogs, all the children who would need them. Jennifer nodded. "Look at this letter." She handed Emma a typed document addressed to the American Association of Animal-Assisted Therapy. Margaret had been proposing a new certification program specifically for dogs working with terminally ill children, and she had volunteered to help develop the training protocols during her final months. She was going to use her own dying process as research, Dorothy realized, her voice filled with awe and heartbreak. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Jennifer reached into the bottom of the folder and pulled out a sealed envelope with Emma's name written on the front in Margaret's careful script. This was attached to a note that said, "To be given to the child who shows Rusty the way forward," Jennifer explained. "Based on everything that's happened this week, I think that child is you." Emma's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written on Margaret's personal stationery, dated just 2 weeks before her death. "Dear Emma," she Read aloud. If you are reading this, it means that Rusty has found someone who understands that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into something even more powerful. I have been watching you during your visits to the hospital, and I believe you possess the rare gift of seeing beyond someone's illness to their essential humanity. Emma paused, overwhelmed by the idea that Margaret had been observing her before they had ever formally met. I am writing this letter during what I know will be my final weeks of life. My doctors have given me perhaps a month, maybe less, and I'm at peace with this timeline because it has allowed me to complete the most important work of my career, ensuring that Rusty and other therapy animals like him will continue helping people long after I'm gone. Dorothy reached over and took Emma's free hand, offering silent support as she continued reading. The program at Children's Memorial is just the beginning. I've been working with hospitals in 4 states to establish a network of specialized therapy dog units, all focused on end-of-life care for children and their families. Rusty will be the first graduate of this expanded program, but he will not be the last. Emma looked up at Jennifer and Dorothy, her eyes wide with understanding. She was creating something huge, not just helping Rusty find a new job, but starting something that would help thousands of children. I believe that you, Emma, have the heart of a healer. If you choose to continue this work, either now or when you are older, know that there will always be a place for someone who understands that the most profound healing happens when we help others face their deepest fears with love and courage. The letter concluded with practical information that took Emma's breath away. Margaret had established a trust fund specifically for training young people in animal-assisted therapy. She had arranged for scholarship programs that would allow children like Emma to learn alongside professional therapists. Most importantly, she had requested that Emma be considered for a special summer apprenticeship program at Children's Memorial, working directly with Rusty and the other therapy animals. If you decide to accept this opportunity, the letter continued, you will be helping to pioneer a new approach to healing that combines the wisdom of children with the comfort of animals. I believe this combination has the power to change how we care for people who are facing life's most difficult challenges. Jennifer pulled out one final document from the folder. There's more. Margaret also arranged for a foundation to be established in her name, the Margaret Thompson Foundation for Healing Hearts. And Emma, she named you as the Youth Advisory Board member. Emma felt as if the ground beneath her was shifting. Everything she thought she understood about Margaret's plan had been just the surface of something much larger and more ambitious. She wasn't just planning for Rusty to go to Philadelphia, Emma said slowly. She was planning for me to go too. Dorothy's voice was filled with wonder and concern. A summer apprenticeship program. Emma, you're 8 years old. Which is exactly why Margaret thought it would work, Jennifer explained, consulting the detailed notes in the folder. Children facing terminal illnesses often relate better to other children than to adults. The idea is that Emma would work alongside trained therapists, helping bridge the gap between the medical world and the emotional world that sick children inhabit. Emma stood up and walked to the center of the garden, needing space to process the magnitude of what she had just learned. Rusty followed her, sensing her emotional turmoil, and positioned himself beside her with his usual intuitive understanding. She unplanned everything, Emma said finally. Not just Rusty's next chapter, but mine too. The question is, Dorothy said gently, what do you want to do with this information? Margaret may have seen something special in you, but that doesn't mean you're obligated to follow the path she envisioned. Emma knelt down and buried her face in Rusty's warm fur, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and drawing strength from his calm presence. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears, but also with determination. I want to call my parents, she said. I want to tell them about Margaret's foundation and about the apprenticeship program and about how Rusty and I could help children who are scared and sick feel less alone. Jennifer smiled. The program doesn't start for 2 weeks. That gives us time to make arrangements and help your parents understand what an incredible opportunity this is. As the afternoon sun slanted through the garden, Emma sat with Rusty and contemplated a future she had never imagined possible. Margaret's death had not been an ending, but a beginning, the start of a mission that would honor her memory while creating new possibilities for healing that neither Emma nor Rusty could accomplish alone. The hidden documents in Margaret's desk had revealed the true scope of her love, not just for Rusty, not just for her patients, but for the continuation of compassionate care long after her own voice had been silenced. Emma was beginning to understand that some kinds of love are so powerful they can reach across the boundary between life and death, continuing to create good in the world through the hands and hearts of those who choose to carry the work forward. That evening, as Emma helped Dorothy prepare dinner, she realized that her summer in Millbrook had become something far different from the quiet, restful experience her parents had planned. Instead, she was being invited into a story of purpose and service that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and what one person, even a very young person, could accomplish when guided by love and an unshakable commitment to helping others. The phone call with Emma's parents lasted 2 hours and involved tears, disbelief, careful questioning, and ultimately the kind of family decision that would change everything. Emma sat in Dorothy's living room with the speakerphone in the center of the coffee table, surrounded by all of Margaret's documents, while her parents processed the extraordinary opportunity that had been presented to their 8-year-old daughter. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," her mother Sarah said, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone trying to remain calm while her world shifted. A woman Emma had never actually met planned for our daughter to participate in a therapy dog program at a children's hospital. "It's more than that," Emma explained patiently. "Margaret saw something in me that even I didn't know was there. She believed I could help sick children in a way that adults can't, because children trust other children differently than they trust grown-ups." Her father Michael's engineering mind focused on practical details. What kind of supervision would Emma have? What are the safety protocols? How would her education continue during this apprenticeship? Dr. Rodriguez had provided comprehensive answers to these questions during a follow-up call that morning. The Children's Memorial Apprenticeship program was designed specifically for young people who showed exceptional empathy and understanding. Emma would work alongside certified child life specialists, receive formal training in therapeutic communication, and participate in carefully supervised interactions with patients. The program has been piloted at 2 other hospitals, Dr. Rodriguez had explained. "We've found that children facing serious illness often feel more comfortable expressing their fears and concerns to peer mentors than to adult counselors." Emma would be trained to recognize when situations require professional intervention, but her primary role would be to provide friendship and emotional support. Dorothy had been quietly supportive throughout these discussions, but now she spoke, up with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to recognize rare opportunities. "Sarah, Michael, I've watched Emma with Rusty this past week. She has something special. A way of understanding what others need and providing it without being asked. Margaret saw that same quality and believed it was worth nurturing." Jennifer had driven over specifically to participate in this conversation, bringing with her additional documentation about the foundation and the broader network of programs Margaret had envisioned. "The apprenticeship includes educational components," she added. "Emma would receive instruction in child development, basic medical terminology, and therapeutic communication techniques. Many of the young people who complete this program go on to careers in healthcare, social work, or counseling." Emma listened to the adults discussing her future and felt a growing certainty about what she wanted to do. "Mom, Dad, I know this sounds scary, and I know it's not what we planned for this summer. But when I was at the hospital and met Maria, the girl who missed her dog, I knew I wanted to help her and other children like her. Rusty and I could do that together." The conversation paused as her parents took time to discuss privately. When they returned to the phone, her mother's voice was filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Emma, if we agree to this, it would mean spending the rest of your summer in Philadelphia, away from us, doing work that will sometimes be sad and difficult. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I'm sure," Emma replied without hesitation. "And I won't be alone. I'll have Rusty and Dr. Rodriguez and all the other people who work at the hospital. Plus, Grandma Dorothy said she would come visit every weekend." Her father asked the question that went to the heart of their concerns. "What happens if it's too much for you? If you find that the work is harder than you expected?" Emma had been thinking about this possibility since discovering Margaret's hidden plans. "Then I'll ask for help, and if I need to come home, I will. But Dad, I keep thinking about what you always tell me about important work, that just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing." The artifacts scattered across Dorothy's coffee table told the story of Margaret's extraordinary planning and her belief in Emma's potential. The Children's Hospital welcome packet that Dr. Rodriguez had sent showed photographs of young patients who would benefit from the Comfort Companions program. Children like Maria, who needed the special kind of healing that came from connection with both animals and understanding peers. "There's something else you should know," Dorothy said gently. "The foundation Margaret established includes provisions for Emma's future education. If she continues with this work, there are scholarships available for veterinary school, medical school, or specialized training in animal-assisted therapy." Emma's eyes widened. She hadn't fully considered the long-term implications of Margaret's planning, but the idea that this summer could be the beginning of a lifetime devoted to healing. Work felt both thrilling and overwhelming. "Margaret saw something in Emma that perhaps we haven't fully recognized yet," Jennifer observed. "She believed that some people are born with gifts for healing, and that those gifts should be nurtured as early as possible." After much discussion, Emma's parents made their decision. They would drive to Philadelphia the following weekend to meet Dr. Rodriguez personally, tour the hospital facilities, and make final arrangements for Emma's participation in the apprenticeship program. If everything met their standards for safety and supervision, Emma could begin her training the week after that. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Emma spent hours reading the materials Dr. Rodriguez had sent, learning about childhood development and the special needs of children facing serious illness. She practiced therapeutic communication techniques with Rusty, who seemed to understand that they were preparing for something important and responded with patient attention to her efforts. Dorothy helped Emma pack for what would likely be a 6-week stay in Philadelphia, including the clothes, books, and personal items that would make a hospital dormitory feel more like home. But the most important thing Emma packed was Margaret's journal, which had become her guide to understanding the heart of healing work. Dr. Harrison visited to share his memories of Margaret's approach to difficult cases and to offer Emma advice about working with families who were facing loss. "Margaret always said that the most important thing wasn't having the right words," he told Emma, as they sat in Dorothy's garden with Rusty between them. "It was having the right heart." She believed that people could sense genuine caring and that presence was often more powerful than anything you could say. Jennifer brought supplies from the hospital, a stethoscope that had belonged to Margaret, a collection of children's books that were popular with young patients, and a specially designed vest that would identify Emma as a member of the therapy team. "Margaret would be so proud," Jennifer said, watching Emma try on the vest. She always believed that healing was a calling that could begin at any age. The most emotional preparation came when Emma spent an entire afternoon at Mercy General, saying goodbye to the patients and staff who had known Margaret and Rusty. Mrs. Patterson, now recovered from her surgery, wept when Emma explained where Rusty was going and why. That dog helped me through the scariest night of my life, Mrs. Patterson said, kneeling to hug Rusty one final time. Knowing that he's going to help other people who are scared makes my heart feel full. Tommy Rodriguez, the boy who had broken his leg, had returned to the hospital for a follow-up appointment and specifically asked to see Rusty before his departure. I'm going to tell all my friends about the therapy dog who helped me be brave, he promised Emma. And maybe when I'm older I can help train therapy dogs too. These conversations helped Emma understand the ripple effect of Margaret's work, how one person's dedication to caring for others could inspire multiple generations to continue that legacy of service. On the evening before their departure for Philadelphia, Emma sat in Margaret's garden, which Dorothy had been tending since her friend's death, with Rusty beside her and the children's hospital welcome packet open in her lap. The packet contained photographs and brief biographies of some of the children currently receiving treatment, including Maria, who had specifically requested to work with the girl and the golden dog when she learned about Emma's upcoming arrival. "Are you nervous?" Dorothy asked, joining them on the garden bench. "Yes," Emma admitted, "but it's the good kind of nervous, the kind you feel when you're about to do something really important." Dorothy smiled and pulled out one final surprise. A letter that had arrived that morning from Angela Martinez, the little girl whose whispered conversation with Rusty had started everything. Now 11 years old and in remission from her cancer, Angela had written to thank Emma for helping Rusty continue his healing work. "Dear Emma," Dorothy read aloud, "my mum told me about how you're helping Rusty move to Children's Memorial, to work with kids like me. I wanted you to know that Rusty saved my life, not by curing my cancer, but by helping me remember that even when I was really sick, I was still me inside. I think you and Rusty are going to help a lot of children. Remember who they are, even when everything else feels scary and different. Thank you for taking care of my friend. Love, Angela." As the sun set over Millbrook, Emma realized that her summer had become something far beyond what anyone could have planned or expected. Margaret's love had reached across the boundary between life and death to create opportunities for healing that would touch countless lives. Tomorrow, Emma and Rusty would begin the next chapter of that story, carrying forward a legacy of compassion that had started with one woman's extraordinary vision and would continue through the hands and hearts of everyone willing to serve. The welcome packet in Emma's lap represented not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to honor Margaret's memory by becoming the kind of person who could see past illness and fear to the essential humanity that connected all of them. As Rusty rested his head against her knee, Emma felt ready to accept that responsibility and to discover what healing work could accomplish when guided by love, courage, and an unshakable commitment to serving others. The morning of Emma's first day at Children's Memorial Hospital dawned clear and bright, with the kind of summer sunshine that made even the most daunting challenges seem manageable. Emma had awakened before her alarm in the small dormitory room. That would be her home for the next 6 weeks, her stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nervousness that felt like butterflies trying to escape. Rusty had spent the night in the therapy animal quarters, a comfortable facility designed specifically for the hospital's four-legged staff members. When Emma arrived to collect him for their first official day of work, she found him alert and ready, wearing his therapy vest with the kind of professional dignity that reminded her why Margaret had believed in him so completely. "Good morning." "In partner," Emma said softly, kneeling to straighten his vest and check that his identification tags were properly attached. "Today we start helping children together." Dr. Rodriguez met them in the main lobby, carrying a folder of materials and wearing the calm, confident expression of someone who had guided many newcomers through their first day of challenging work. "Emma, Rusty, are you ready for your orientation?" The tour began in the Family Education Center, where Emma would receive her formal training in therapeutic communication and child development. The room was designed to feel welcoming rather than A clinical, with comfortable furniture, natural lighting, and walls decorated with artwork created by young patients over the years. Your role here will be unique, Dr. Rodriguez explained as they settled into a small conference area. You'll work primarily with children between the ages of 6 and 12 who are receiving treatment for serious illnesses. Some of them will recover completely, others are facing more uncertain outcomes, and a few are in hospice care. Emma listened intently while Rusty positioned himself beside her chair, already demonstrating the calm professionalism that had made him such an effective therapy animal at Mercy General. The most important thing to remember is that these children are still children first, Dr. Rodriguez continued. They want to play, to laugh, to feel normal despite their medical circumstances. Your job, both of you, is to help them access those feelings of normalcy and joy, even when they're scared or in pain. The first artifact of Emma's new life was presented to her during this orientation, a hand-drawn picture created by Sarah, a 9-year-old girl currently receiving treatment for leukemia. The drawing showed a child and a golden dog sitting together under a rainbow with the words "For my new friends" written in careful block letters across the bottom. Sarah has been asking about you and Rusty since we told her you were coming, Dr. Rodriguez said, handing Emma the picture. She's been in treatment for 8 months, and she's particularly excited about meeting another child who understands that dogs have special healing powers. Emma studied the drawing, touched by the hope and anticipation it represented. When will we meet her? This afternoon. But first, let's continue your orientation and introduce you to some of the other team members you'll be working with. They spent the morning moving through different areas of the hospital, meeting the nurses, doctors, social workers, and child life specialists who formed the comprehensive care team. Emma was struck by how everyone seemed to understand immediately that she and Rusty represented something special, not just another therapy animal program, but the fulfillment of Margaret's vision for a new approach to healing. In the pediatric oncology ward, they met Jennifer Chen, a child life specialist who would be Emma's primary supervisor and mentor. Jennifer had been working with seriously ill children for over a decade, and she possessed the rare combination of professional expertise and genuine warmth that made even the most frightened patients feel safe. Emma, I want you to understand that this work will sometimes be difficult, Jennifer said as they stood outside the playroom where several young patients were engaged in art therapy. You'll meet children who are facing challenges that no child should have to face. Some of them will recover and go home to normal lives. Others won't. Emma nodded solemnly. Dr. Rodriguez explained that. I think I'm ready to help however I can. I believe you are. Margaret's letters about you suggested that you have an unusual capacity for empathy and understanding. We'll find out together how to channel those gifts in ways that truly help. The playroom was filled with children of various ages, some in wheelchairs, others moving slowly with IV poles or other medical equipment. Despite their circumstances, the room buzzed with the kind of energy that comes from children engaged in creative activities. Art supplies covered several tables, and the walls displayed dozens of colorful paintings and drawings created by young patients. Children, Jennifer called softly, I'd like you to meet Emma and Rusty. They're going to be joining our team here, helping kids who want to spend time with a very special therapy dog. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Several children approached cautiously, drawn by Rusty's gentle presence and curious about Emma, who was closer to their own age than most of the adults who worked in the hospital. A small boy with a bright red bandana covering his bald head was the first to speak. Is that the dog who's going to live here now? Can I pet him? This is Rusty, Emma replied. And yes, he's going to be working here. He loves meeting new friends, and he's very gentle. As the boy knelt down to pet Rusty, Emma watched the careful way the dog positioned himself to accommodate the child's medical equipment and physical limitations. Even in this new environment, Rusty's training and instincts guided him to provide exactly the kind of comfort each individual needed. "What's your name?" Emma asked the boy. "I'm Marcus. I'm 7 and I have brain cancer, but I'm getting better." His matter-of-fact delivery of such serious information reminded Emma that these children had learned to integrate their medical realities into their daily lives in ways that would challenge most adults. "It's nice to meet you, Marcus. Would you like to help me and Rusty learn about how things work here?" Marcus's face lit up with the importance of being given a special job. "I can show you where we keep the dog treats, and where the best place is to sit when you want to look out the window, and which kids are having hard days and might need extra dog time." As Emma followed Marcus through the playroom, with Rusty walking calmly beside them, she felt the weight and wonder of beginning the work Margaret had envisioned. This was more than a summer job or an educational opportunity. It was the start of learning how love could be transformed into service, and how healing could happen through the simple act of one heart reaching out to another. The afternoon brought Emma's first official session working with a young patient, and the profound realization that Margaret's training manual had prepared both her and Rusty for moments exactly like this one. Sarah, the 9-year-old who had drawn the welcome picture, was having what the nurses called a difficult day. Exhausted from chemotherapy and struggling with the nausea and emotional exhaustion that came with aggressive cancer treatment, Emma found Sarah curled up in her hospital bed, clutching a stuffed elephant and staring out the window with the kind of vacant expression that spoke of a child trying to escape her circumstances through sheer force of will. Jennifer Chen had briefed Emma on Sarah's condition and current emotional state, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the reality of seeing such a young person dealing with so much pain. "Hi, Sarah," Emma said softly, settling into the bedside chair that had been positioned specifically for therapy visits. "I'm Emma, and this is Rusty. Thank you for the beautiful picture you drew for us." Sarah turned her head slightly, her eyes focusing on Rusty with the kind of interest that suggested animals might be easier to trust than people at this particular moment. "He's bigger than I thought he would be," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse. "From the medical treatments that were both saving her life and making her feel terrible." "He is pretty big," Emma agreed, "but he's also very gentle. Would you like him to come closer so you can see him better?" Sarah nodded, and Emma guided Rusty to a position beside the bed where Sarah could reach him without having to move her IV lines or disturb her comfort. The dog seemed to intuitively understand the child's fragility, moving slowly and settling himself carefully so that Sarah could rest her hand on his head. The transformation was subtle but immediate. Sarah's breathing became less shallow. Her grip on the stuffed elephant relaxed slightly, and for the first time since Emma had entered the room, the girl's expression showed something other than resignation. "My dog at home is named Patches," Sarah said quietly. "He's a lot smaller than Rusty, but he used to sleep on my bed every night before I had to come here." Emma pulled Margaret's training manual from her bag, the artifact that had guided this entire journey and contained Margaret's wisdom about connecting with children who were facing overwhelming challenges. "Would you like to see some pictures of other children who have worked with Rusty?" Emma asked, opening the manual to a section that Margaret had specifically designed for moments like this. The manual contained photographs from Rusty's work at Mercy General, but more importantly, it included Margaret's detailed notes about how to help children process their feelings about illness, fear, and separation from home. Emma had spent hours studying these pages, learning Margaret's techniques for therapeutic conversation. "This is Tommy," Emma said, showing Sarah a photograph of the boy who had broken his leg. "He was really scared about having surgery, but Rusty sat with him while the doctors explained what would happen. Tommy said later that having Rusty there made him feel like he had a friend who understood." Sarah studied the photograph with growing interest. "Was Tommy as scared as I am?" Emma considered the question carefully, remembering Margaret's advice about honesty balanced with hope. I think he was very scared, just like you are. But Tommy also told me that being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Sometimes being brave means doing hard things, even when you're frightened. I don't feel brave, Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible. I feel tired and sick and like I want to go home. Those are normal feelings, Emma replied, echoing the language she had learned from Jennifer Chen and Dr. Rodriguez. And it's okay to have all of those feelings at the same time as being brave. Rusty seemed to sense that this was a crucial moment in their interaction. Without being asked, he carefully positioned himself so that Sarah could hug him if she wanted, to offering comfort through his warm, steady presence. "Can Rusty stay with me for a while?" Sarah asked. "Of course he can. That's exactly what he's here for." For the next hour, Emma and Rusty remained in Sarah's room, sometimes talking quietly about home and family, and the things Sarah missed most. Sometimes sitting in comfortable silence while Sarah petted Rusty and found comfort in his peaceful acceptance of whatever she needed. When Sarah's mother arrived for afternoon visiting hours, she found her daughter sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, with Rusty lying quietly beside the bed and Emma reading in the nearby chair. "She looks so peaceful," Sarah's mother whispered to Emma. "She's been having such a hard time since this round of chemo started." Emma showed her Margaret's training manual and explained how Rusty had been specifically trained to provide comfort during medical treatments. Margaret, the woman who trained him, believed that children need to feel normal and loved even when everything else in their lives feels scary and different. Sarah's mother wiped away tears. "She hasn't slept well. In 3 days, whatever you and Rusty did, it worked." As Emma and Rusty prepared to leave for the day, Sarah woke up long enough to ask one more question. "Will you come back tomorrow? We'll be here," Emma promised. "Rusty and I are going to visit every day until you feel ready to go home." Walking back to the therapy animal quarters with Rusty, Emma felt the profound satisfaction that comes from knowing you've made a real difference in someone's life. Margaret's training manual had guided them through their first successful patient interaction, proving that love and healing could indeed be learned and shared. The manual contained Margaret's wisdom about patience, presence, and the power of simply being with someone who was suffering. Emma was beginning to understand that her role wasn't to fix or cure, but to offer companionship and comfort during some of life's most difficult moments. That evening, as she wrote in her journal about the day's experiences, Emma realized that she was already becoming the kind of person Margaret had believed she could be, someone who could see past illness and fear to the essential humanity that connected all of them, and who could offer that recognition as a gift to others who needed it most. 3 months later, Emma stood in the garden behind Children's Memorial Hospital, watching Rusty work with a group of young patients who had gathered for the weekly Healing Circle, a program that had grown from Margaret's original vision into something even more powerful than anyone had imagined. The autumn air carried the scent of changing leaves and new possibilities, and Emma's heart was full of the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've found your true calling. The central artifact of this final chapter was something entirely new, a photo album that Emma had begun creating to document Rusty's new life and the children they had helped together. Unlike Margaret's careful professional documentation, Emma's album captured the spontaneous moments of joy and connection that happened when healing work was guided by love rather than protocol. On the first page was a picture of Sarah, now in remission and preparing to return home, laughing as Rusty performed his favorite trick of balancing a treat on his nose. Her hair had begun to grow back in soft curls, and her eyes held the bright spark of a child who had rediscovered hope. "Emma, look at this one," called Marcus, the 7-year-old who had become Emma's unofficial assistant and guide during her first overwhelming weeks at the hospital. He was pointing to a photograph of himself and Rusty reading together in the corner of the playroom, both of them completely absorbed in a story about a brave dog who helped children overcome their fears. Marcus had been declared cancer-free 2 weeks earlier, but he continued to visit the hospital regularly as part of a new program Emma had proposed, young survivors helping current patients navigate their treatment journey. Margaret's foundation had provided funding for this peer support initiative, recognizing that healing often happened best when children helped other children. "That's going in the special section," Emma replied, taking the photograph and placing it carefully in the album. "The part for kids who graduated from being patients to being helpers." Dr. Rodriguez approached their small group, carrying a manila envelope that Emma recognized as official correspondence. Over the past 3 months, Emma had learned to read the different expressions that crossed Dr. Rodriguez's face, and today's look suggested important news. "Emma, I have something to share with all of you," Dr. Rodriguez announced, gathering the children around her. "The Margaret Thompson Foundation has just received approval to expand the Comfort Companions program to 5 additional hospitals across the country." The children erupted in cheers, understanding that this meant more therapy dogs and more children like Emma would be trained to provide the special kind of healing that happened when young people helped other young people. "There's more, Doctor." Rodriguez continued, smiling at Emma. "The foundation has asked if you would be willing to help train the first group of youth companions at each new location. It would mean traveling during school breaks and summers, working with children and therapy animals at hospitals in different states." Emma felt her heart racing with excitement and possibility. What had begun as a summer project to help one grieving dog had evolved into a calling that could shape her entire future. "I would love to do that," Emma said without hesitation. "But I think Rusty should help make the decision too." She knelt down beside Rusty, who had been listening to the conversation with the kind of alert attention that suggested he understood far more than anyone gave him credit for. In his mouth, he still occasionally carried the small knitted mouse that Jennifer had brought from Mercy General, a connection to his past that he had never completely released. "What do you think, boy? Are you ready to help train other therapy dogs to do the work Margaret taught you?" Rusty's response was immediate and unambiguous. He dropped his toy, walked to Emma's photo album, and carefully placed his paw on the picture of Sarah laughing. The message was clear. He was ready to help create more moments like that, with more children, in more places where healing was needed. Angela Martinez, now 12 years old and serving as a volunteer mentor for newly diagnosed children, had traveled from her home to attend this celebration. She carried with her a letter from the first hospital that would receive a Comfort Companions program, where 3 young patients had specifically requested a program like Emma and Rusty's. "Margaret would be so proud," Angela said, kneeling, "to hug Rusty. She always believed that love was the most powerful medicine, and look how far that love has traveled." Emma looked around at the garden filled with children who had been touched by Margaret's vision. Some who were still receiving treatment, others who had recovered and returned to help newcomers, and a few who carried Rusty's comfort with them as they faced their final days with courage and peace. The photo album in Emma's hands told the story of transformation, her own growth from a curious 8-year-old to a confident young healer, Rusty's evolution from a grieving pet to the anchor of a revolutionary therapy program, and the continuation of Margaret's legacy through dozens of children who had learned that healing could happen in the midst of suffering. Dorothy had driven down from Millbrook for this celebration, bringing with her a surprise that made Emma's eyes fill with tears. She carried a small wooden box that had belonged to Margaret, containing the nurse's original hospital ID badge, the one Rusty had protected during his vigil, and a final letter that had been found among Margaret's papers. "Just the week before, to Emma and Rusty," Dorothy read aloud as the children gathered in a circle. "If you are reading this, it means that love has found a way to continue its work even after I am gone. Thank you for proving that the bonds between hearts are stronger than the boundaries between life and death, and that healing is not something we receive, but something we give to one another." The work you are doing together is the greatest monument to love that I could ever have imagined. Keep healing hearts, keep building bridges, and keep believing in the power of one faithful dog and one brave child to change the world, one patient at a time. As the sun set over Philadelphia, Emma and Rusty sat together in Margaret's memory garden, surrounded by friends who had become family and contemplating a future bright with possibility. The photo album beside them would continue to grow, page by page, story by story, as they carried Margaret's legacy of love and healing to children across the country who needed to know that they were not alone. Emma understood now that some kinds of love are so powerful they create their own momentum, reaching across time and distance to touch lives that the original giver could never have imagined. Margaret's love for Rusty had become love for countless children, and that love would continue to multiply through every heart they touched, every fear they eased, and every moment of healing they made possible together. The faithful dog who had once waited outside a hospital door had found his true purpose, and the young girl who had stopped to comfort him had discovered hers. Their story was just beginning.